Okay, good day, students. So for today, we are going to discuss on your lymphoid system or your immune system. So when we say lymphoid system or your immune system, this actually comprises the structures, the cells which are distributed throughout your body, in which ang ilahang principal function is to protect your body from invasion and damage by microorganisms as well as your foreign substances. So your immune system actually provides what we call as the second and the third line of defense against your invading pathogens. Kaya ang first line of defense nimo is imuhamang epithelial barrier or what we call as your skin, your mucosa. Sila man ang nag-form sa complete lining and covering of your body surfaces. Now, once this physical barrier or imuhang skin is ma-breach siya, ma-cut, ma-tear, na-abrasion, or even if na mga foreign substances na capable or are able to penetrate, pero wala yun siya, they're able to penetrate but have not yet penetrated the intact barrier, your second and your third line of defense may still be activated. So, kani siya, muna siya ang function or muna siya ang reaction sa imuhang immune system. Again, your immune system is there to function primarily to protect your body from invasion and damage sa mga microorganisms and foreign substances. So there are four basic types of reaction or immune reaction. We have what we call as your cell-mediated immune response, which is your cells will react against and kill the microorganism, the foreign cells, especially from those given to tumors or transplantations, kidney transplant, or from virus-infected cells. So kanimong cell-mediated immune response, these are mainly mediated by your T lymphocytes. Then we also have what we call as your humoral immune response. So si humoral immune response, this is a type of immune reaction in which nagdepend siya sa formation of antibodies which can inactivate or destroy these foreign substances. So your humoral immune response depends on the formation of your antibodies, which is mediated by your B lymphocyte. So you have to remember, si B lymphocyte, pag mag-mature na siya, mahimo siyang plasma cells. Si plasma cells, siya na dayon ang mag-produce sa imuhang antibodies. Now, these antibodies could be specific to specific food na antigen present. So your antibodies can attack specific or can attach or can bind to specific antigen present. So third immune reaction, we have what we call as your innate immune system. So this is considered to be the simplest, fast, and is a non-specific na immune reaction. Wala siya ga-depend on any previous contact with your pathogen. As long as present ang pathogen, immediately ang imuhang immune or imuhang innate immune system ang mo function. So your innate immune system is composed of your macrophages as well as your neutrophils. Sila ang imuhang mga phagocyte invaders and apil po dira si natural killer cells which is capable of killing the tumor cells, those that are virally infected cells as well as the bacteria and parasites. Next type of immune reaction that we have is your adaptive immune system. So si adaptive immune system, this is responsible for eliminating threats from specific invaders. So si adaptive immune response, na siya four distinctive properties. We have the specificity, the diversity, the memory, and the self-non-self recognition. So kani nga ability, na siya capability to distinguish between structures na nagbelong sa organism, which is what we call as yourself, or those that are foreign or what we call as your non-self. So through your adaptive immune system, your body is capable of identifying if kani siya nga invader or kani siya nga antigen, is this from my body or is this from outside? So through your adaptive immune system, specific ang iyahang reaction or specific ang iyahang response. Depende sa kung saan ni-invade sa iya. And aside from that, naa siya memory because it can recognize if kani siya nga infection or kani siya nga invader, bimbalik na ba ni siya na by previous na infection prior sa karon nga infection or inana. So your adaptive immune system has your T lymphocyte and your B lymphocyte as well as your specialized macrophages na gitawag nato og mga antigen-presenting cells. Sila ang mag-initiate and mag-participate sa imuhang adaptive immune response. And these cells will be able to communicate with each other through the presence of your cytokines or your cytokines. So, kaning mga cytokines, these are released in response to encounters with your foreign substances or your antigens. So, for example, na ay ni-enter sa imong body. And kaning nga foreign material can naano siya antigen. And this antigen or this foreign material can induce the release of cytokines. And this kaning mga cytokines will be used nga mo'y mahimo siya og signal or communication sa imong mga cells necessary to induce your immune reaction. So we have what we call as your immunogen. So kani si immunogen, this is a foreign molecule which can elicit an immune response in the host. So the presence of an immunogen can elicit or can always elicit, meaning pag naay presence sa antigen, immunogen, immediately maka-elicit na siya or maka-cause na siya og immune reaction sa imong body. We also have what we call as an antigen, which is a molecule that can react with your antibody irrespective of its ability to elicit an immune response. Meaning, the presence of antigen, pwede siya maki-interact or maka-interact with your antibody regardless if capable ba siya of eliciting eliciting an immune reaction. We also have what we call as your epitope. So si epitope is what we call as the antigenic determinant, meaning this is a part of your antigen wherein your antibody can attach itself. So dira mo attach ang imuhang antibody sa epitope. So this is your, let's say for example, mo ni itsura sa imuhang antigen. So mo ni siya imuhang antigen. So sa imong antigen atay gitawag og epitope. So kani si epitope mo ni siya ang part sa imong antigen wherein your antibodies can bind with or can interact with. So kani siya, this resembles your antibodies, and si antibody mo bind na siya with your epitope or the part of your antigen that is capable or the part of your antigen that is considered to be the antigenic determinant. So unsa di ay nang, or let us discuss further what is an adaptive immune response. So your adaptive immune response can actually take days or even weeks para mahimo siyang established or mahimo siyang effective na immune reaction. Mas dugay siya compared with your innate, but mas specific siya sa imong pathogens. It's because na siya gitawag nato og memory. Maka-remember siya if infected na baka prior or na-infect na baka aning specific na infection. Let's say for example, na-infect na baka with this virus years before, mga nanak. Your adaptive immune response is capable of or naa siya gitawag nato og memory na ability. So, your adaptive immunity is a type of an immunity which occurs after an exposure to an antigen either from a pathogen or through vaccination. Kay isa sa kanang principle sa imong vaccination is that itagaan ka namang with duha ka types of vaccination, either antibody or antigen ang ihatag sa imuha. So let's say for example, let's focus on the antigen. So say for example, vaccinated ka. Tagaan ka og antigen na vaccine. So kani siya nga antigen, mag-serve na siya as kanang dili na siya invasive sa imong body, dili na siya maka-cause of infection sa imong body, but merely ang function ana niya or ang purpose ana niya is to introduce that to your body nga. Ingon imong body ba nga, oy, naay inani nga antigen ha. So imong buhaton is sa wala pa ka na-infect, pagbuhat na daan og antibodies kay para dili ka ma-harm in the future if ever ma-meet nimo siya og balik. So mo na siya ang ginabuhat sa imong mga vaccines. Tagaan kanila or i-expose kanila to specific antigens so that your body will form antibodies specific pod ato nga antigen. So that when time comes na ma-infect ka, dili na kayo in ana ka severe ang reaction sa imuhang body. Let's say for example, kaning sa COVID, tagaan ka og vaccine so that by the time nga ma-infect ka og vaccine, dili kaayo in ana ka-grabe or dili in ana ka dili bitaw maka-manifest gyud og ayo ang virus sa imong body. It's because prepared na imong body na ana kay mga soldiers, na ana kay mga fighters against those specific na antigen. Mo na siya ang imong adaptive immune response. Ibali, imong body naka-adapt na siya, naka-adapt na siya, prepared na nga mga antibodies. So aside from that, no, aside from vaccination, you can also acquire your adaptive immune response through normal na kanang infection. Let's say for example, di chickenpox ka karon. So, di ba, known man na siya sa inyo nga pag chickenpox na gani ka, less na ang chances na maka-chickenpox ka o balik. If ever man gani na ma-chickenpox ka o balik, lahi na siya na strain or lahi na siya nga virus. Dili na po chickenpox ang tawag ana niya sa it's called varicella zoster if I'm not mistaken. So more siya ina na ba? Let's say for example, chickenpox ka karon. So karon na na-infect ka with chickenpox, your body doesn't recognize chickenpox pa. Wala pa siya antibodies against that chickenpox na infection na naa sa imong karon. So imong body is pamulo pa lang siya og buhat, kamot pa lang siya nga ma-fight niya tong infection sa imong body. But eventually, no, given after how many days, your body will be able to form or maka-establish na siya o mga antibodies specific to that chickenpox. So eventually, ma-heal ka and so on. Then after how many days or years, pag makam in contact ka with person with chickenpox, dili na dayon ka easily na ma-infect or dili na dayon easily na maka-manifest sa mga signs and symptoms. It's because your body is already equipped with the soldiers or your antibodies to fight against those chickenpox. Inana mo na siya ang inyong adaptive immune response. So, naatay gitawag sa inyong adaptive immune response, naatay gitawag og primary o secondary immune response. So, as I have said earlier, during the first encounter or the first time na ma-encounter sa organism or sa body nimo ang isa ka antigen, ang reaction or ang immune reaction is very slow and medyo hinay pa pud ang iyang reaction. Muna siya gitawag nato og primary response. As you can see sa table, di ba, as a chart, sa graph, during the first exposure sa imong antigen, gamay lang kaayo ang production of antibodies against and dili pud kaayo siya strong. But the second time na ma-expose ka to the same antigen, mas pas na o mas intense na ang response. As you can see, taas na kayo ang reaction sa imuhang antibody. So you have your IgG na taas na kayo og production of your IgG against those antigen. So muna siya ang imong primary and your secondary response. So unsay difference ni primary ug secondary? We have the primary, it is a result from a primary contact with an antigen, whereas the secondary, a result na siya with a second or a subsequent contact with the same antigen. So sa pag first time pagaling mo na encounter na siya nga antigen, tawag na siya og primary immune response. But the second time or so sige na nimo nagma-meet na siya nga antigen or kana siya nga virus, secondary immune response na ang mo react. So your primary immune response also, it will take around 7 to 10 days before mo peak ang imuhang antibody levels, meaning after 7 to 10 days pa from exposure ay pamudaghan ang levels sa imuhang antibodies. Whereas with your secondary, within 3 to 5 days, na-reach na nimo ang peak sa imuhang antibodies. And Si primary immune response po can only elicit or a prolonged period is required para maka-establish ka og immunity. Whereas sa secondary, shorter time ang needed nimo to establish immunity. There is also a rapid decline sa imong antibody level sa primary, whereas in your secondary, mas taas na or the antibody level remains high for a longer period of time to make sure na kanang na-fight off na gyud or nawala na gyud tong mga antigens or katong mga foreign material na naka-infect sa imong body. So we also have your primary immune response mainly appears sa imong lymph nodes as well as your spleen, but with your secondary, nag-appear na siya sa imong bone marrow, followed by the spleen and your lymph nodes. So we have mentioned immunoglobulins or your antibodies. Unsa day ni sila? So immunoglobulins are antibodies that are manufactured by your plasma cells. Again, when your B lymphocytes mature, they form your plasma cells. And your plasma cells secrete or they manufacture your antibodies. So typically, an immunoglobulin has a 2 pair of heavy chains and a 2 pair of light chains. So mo ni siya ang imuhang light chains and your heavy chains. So ang imuha pong immunoglobulin or your antibodies natay gitawag og Fab and your Fc region. So mo ni siya si Fab region nimo, duha ka Fab, and this is your Fc region. So si Fab nimo gitawag na siya Fab, it's because shortcut siya for fragment antigen binding, meaning through the Fab region, dira siya mo bind with your antigen. So diri mo bind ang imong antigen, dira mag-bind ang antigen. You also have your Fc region or your fragment crystallizable wherein si Fc region capable siya of binding with your antigen presenting cells, yung mga macrophages, and so on. So si Fab region is actually variable na siya. It's because lahi-lahi man ang imuhang antigen. Lahi-lahi man og amino acid or lahi-lahi man na siya og formation ang imuhang antigen. So the Fab portion of your immunoglobulin will depend kung unsa pod or kung asa siya specific na antigen mo bind or asa siya specific na antigen against with. So mo na nga imuhang Fab portion is variable. So there are 5 classes of your immunoglobulins. We have your IgG, which is a monomer. Siya po ang pinakadaghan, around 80%. It is usually found sa imong blood, lymph, your intestinal lumen, and it can activate phagocytosis, can neutralize your antigen, and can protect the newborn. It's because si IgG lang ang only immunoglobulin which can cross your placenta. So this is how your IgG would look like. Then we have your IgA, which is a dimer, around 10 to 15%, and usually found siya sa imuhang saliva, milk, and your tears. Usually, it protects the surface of your mucosa and can resist botulism. So dimer man siya, so duha siya kabuok. Dimer. So your IgA is bound by your J chain. So through J chain, nausa ang duha ka monomer. Mo na gitawag siya og dimer. Then we have your IgM, which is a pentamer. So lima pud siya ka heavy chain of lima ka pair of heavy chain and light chains. So around 5 to 10% and usually found together with your IgD sa surface sa imong B lymphocytes. And this is the first antibody nga ma-produce sa imong initial immune or sa imong primary response. So by the time nga ma-produce si IgM, your body is then capable of producing other immunoglobulins. So the same with your IgA, bound pud imong IgM with your J chain or your joining chain. Then we have your IgD, which is a monomer, around 0 to 2% lang siya. It is found on the surface of your B cell and has a receptor to your antigens. We also have your IgE, which is present siya sa surface sa imong basophils and your mast cells and can participate sa allergy as well as the lysis of your parasitic worms. So your cells or unsa man mga cells na naa sa imong adaptive immune system. So one, we have your T lymphocyte. So you have to remember, or what you have to remember with your T lymphocyte is that di ka na siya sa imong bone marrow, but eventually mag-migrate na siya sa imong thymus to mature or to become an immunocompetent. So when you say immunocompetent, meaning capable na siya of expressing specific molecules sa ilang cell membranes which can permit them to perform their function sa ilahang sa immune response. So, di ba si T lymphocyte, siya man ang responsible for your cellular mediated immune response. So, si T cell, naapod na siya, gitawag na to TCR or your T cell receptor in which nag-function siya as your antigen receptor. So, through your T cell receptor, your antigen can bind to your T lymphocytes. But si T cell or your T cell is considered to be an MHC restricted because your TCR can only bind or can only recognize the epitope of your antigen if kani siya nga epitope is a polypeptide and if kani siya nga epitope is bound to an MHC molecule like those na makita nato sa ATC. So later on, akong i-explain sa inyo unsay pasabot ana niya. So there are 4 subtypes of T cells. We have your T helper cells, we have TH1 and your TH2. So sila ang modulate sa imong T and your B cells by stimulating their activities. So si TH1, siya ang ga-elicit og response against bacterial and viral attack. Whereas si TH2 or your T helper 2 cell, siya ang ga-elicit og response against parasitic and your mucosal infection. Again, si TH1, iyahang cytokines or your cytokines, ang yang ginasecrete, ga-elicit siya og bacterial or viral na attack. Whereas si TH2, ang iyahang gina-release food is against parasite or mucosal infection. Then we have your T cytotoxic cell or your TC cell. This is a specialized recognized antigens that is associated with your major histocompatibility 1 on the surface of other cells. So these are produced or kaning TH or imong cytotoxic cell, they can produce perforin and other proteins that are capable of killing foreign cells like virus-infected cells as well as some tumor cells. Next, we have your T suppressor cells. So your T suppressor cell, from the name itself, gina-repress niya ang imuhang immune response by inhibiting the capabilities of your T and B cells. So the presence of your T suppressor cells inhibits the functions of your T and B cells. We also have your T memory cells. These are members of the clones na naay immunological memory for a particular isotope. So your T memory cells, from the name itself, na siya memory, capable siya of recognizing specific na mga isotopes. So, di ba, I have mentioned katong function sa imuhang T cell. Di ba si T cell, ang gingon diri kay MHC restricted daw kuno siya kay ay lang daw niya ma-recognize ang or a TCR can only recognize an epitope if bound siya to an MHC molecule. So example lang ni siya, overview or just a short introduction lang kaayo. So say for example, na kay tumor sa imong body. Now your tumor can elicit or can secrete some antigens. Kay foreign material man na siya or considered man na siya as foreign material to your body or kani siya, managi na siya antigens. Now, these antigens are recognized by your ATC. So, say for example, macrophage, na-recognize siya ni macrophage na kanang lalagi ko kailaan niya nga antigen ay na ba. So, your ATC, kwaon na niya ng antigen and kani siya nga antigen will bind to your AHC which is found sa inyong ATC. Now, once ma-bind na siya ang imong antigen sa MHC na naa sa surface sa imong APC, iyan na din ang i-introduce sa imong T cell. Now, your T cell, again, can only recognize antigen if they are bound to your MHC. So, the antigen, babound na siya sa receptor sa imong T cell, and once mabind na siya sa T cell receptor, your T cell will be activated. Once ma-activate siya, na ay migration as well as infiltration na mag-occur dito sa imong tumor, eventually, your T cell is capable of killing this tumor. So, mo na siya. So, through your APC and your MHC, your T cell will be able to recognize this foreign antigen na present. So, mo na ang mahitabo. Then we have your other cells na naa sa imuhang adaptive immune response. We have your B lymphocytes. So, B lymphocytes are small lymphocytes na gikan sa imuhang bone marrow or nag-originate siya and eventually mag-mature siya within rapod sa imuhang bone marrow. Unlike with your T lymphocyte, diba? Gikan siya sa bone marrow and then dito siya mag-mature or dito siya mahimong immunocompetent sa imuhang thymus. Si B lymphocytes, dito siya ga-originate, dito po siya mahimong immunocompetent within the bone marrow. So siya or the process of becoming an immunocompetent, each cell can manufacture around 1,000 or 150,000 IgM molecules and inserts this into the plasma membrane. So again, si IgM ang first nga antibody nga ma-produce sa imong B lymphocytes or sa imong plasma cells. Once ma-produce na nila ang imong IgM molecules, eventually mahimo na dahil silang capable, they are then capable of kanang making other immunoglobulins. Kana siya nga mechanism o na siya gitawag nato og class switching. The capability of your B lymphocyte to produce other or a different class of immunoglobulins after producing the IgMs. So, your B lymphocytes are called as surface immunoglobulins because naaman sila receptors for specific antigens. And again, once ma-activate ang imuhang B cell, mag-transform siya to form your plasma cells as well as your B memory cells. Again, your plasma cells, sila ang mag-produce sa imuhang antibodies. Next, we have your antigen-presenting cells. So, your antigen-presenting cells are mostly found sa tissues in which ga-express sila sa imong MHC. So, katong same picture ka ganina. Your APC are mostly found in your tissues and they mostly express your MHC in which dira mag-bind ang imong antigens. So T cells then produce the cytokines in which katong mga cytokines can cause your B cell to respond para mag-process siya ato nga mga antigen to make your antibodies. So your IPCs includes your macrophages, mga dendritic cells like the Langerhans of the epidermis and your oral mucosa. You also have your B cells and your epithelial reticular cells in the thymus. So, same with your T helper cells, your antigen-presenting cells can also manufacture and release these cytokines. Next, we have your MHC or your major histocompatibility complex. So, these are molecules na naa sa surface, no? Which enables your immune system to distinguish self from non-self antigens. So your MHC is the one responsible to determine if kani siya nga antigen is normal ba siya nga naa sa imong body or is it kanang dili ba siya sa imong self or is it from your non-self. So sa humans gitawag na siya og gitawag po na siya og HLA or human leukocyte antigen because they were discovered sa imong leukocytes. So there are two types of MHC. We have your MHC1, which is naa siya sa tanan ni mga cells, and you have your MHC2, which is only found sa imuhang APC or your antigen-presenting cells. So we have always mentioned your cytokines. Unsa din na sila? Your cytokines are actually group of peptides or glycoproteins which can influence both your cellular and your humoral mechanism. Again, when we say humoral mechanism, katunin siyang nag-depend with antibody production. So, they act on your cells na naay receptor sa ilaha, not only sa imuha mga immune cells, but also other cells sa mga other systems like the nervous and your endocrine system. So mainly, kanimong mga cytokines or cytokines, they are synthesized by your macrophages and your leukocytes, and also sa mga endothelial cells and your fibroblasts. So under your cytokines, we have your interleukins, which are cytokines or cytokines that interact with your leukocytes. So they can activate their multiplication as well as the differentiation, meaning the presence of your interleukins or specific na mga interleukins can actually cause the production of many leukocytes as well as the maturation of your leukocytes. We also have your lymphokine or your lymphokine, which are cytokines produced by your lymphocytes. You have your monokines or your monokines, which are cytokines synthesized by your monocytes or your macrophages. Your chemokines or your chemotaxins, which are cytokines that induce attraction of your leukocytes to the sites of inflammation. Meaning, once manggod na inflammation na nag-occur sa certain part of your body, na ana siya gina-release. So, kanang gina-release ana niya nga, let's say for example, i-release na siya sa imong cells na nag-inflame or na-damage. Kana siya, let's say, your chemotaxins, kaning chemotaxins can attract other leukocytes or other mga cells necessary for your inflammation. You also have your interferons, which are cytokines produced by any cells that are infected by virus. And you have your tumor necrosis factor, which stimulates the expression of adhesion molecules, the secretion of chemokines by macrophages, and promotes apoptosis of target cells, which has systemic effects such as fever. So, so mo to siya ang inyong mga common cells or mga mechanism necessary sa inyong immune reaction. Now we move on to your lymphoid organs. So again, the lymphatic system is a system na naay vessels, cells, as well as organs na nag-carry sa excess fluid to the bloodstream and filters pathogens from the blood. So we have your lymphoid organs are categorized into two. We have your primary or your central lymphoid organs and your peripheral lymphoid organs. So sa primary nimo na dira imong bone marrow and your thymus. Sa peripheral, you have your spleen, your lymph nodes, the mouth, the solitary nodules, tonsils, appendix, and your Peyer's patches and mga ileum. So unsa man ni si thymus? So your thymus is considered to be the primary lymphoid organ and is the site of maturation sa imuhang T lymphocyte. So imuhang thymus, makita nimo na siya sa imuhang superior mediastinum extending over the great vessels of your heart and is a small encapsulated organ composed of two lobes. So mo ni siya imuhang thymus. So each of these or the capsule of your thymus, so si thymus na siya gitawag nato og capsule. So ang capsule sa imong thymus is composed of a dense irregular collagenous connective tissue with some elastic fibers which extends the interlobular trabecula that incompletely subdivide your thymus into lobules. So kani nga mga lobules or each lobule is composed of a cortex and a medulla. So mo ni siya imuhang capsule and then naa siya trabecula which makes it or makakos siya nga ma-divide ang imuhang thymus forming lobules. And imuhang lobules na siya cortex and a medulla. So mo ni siya imuhang lobule, isa ka lobule, na siya cortex, kaning dark staining, and then ang light staining is your medulla. So, unsa day naa sa cortex sa imuhang thymus? So, the immunologically competency of your T cells, the elimination of your self-intolerant T lymphocyte, as well as the MHC recognition actually occurs sa imuhang thymic cortex or sa cortex sa imong thymus. So kaning cortex sa imong thymus, wala na siya lymphatic nodules or plasma cells, but naa siya lightly staining ng mga epithelial reticular cells as well as macrophages, naapod siya densely packed, dark staining ng mga small T lymphocytes in which mo ay nakakos na ang imuhang cortex appears dark in color because of these small T lymphocytes. And then we also have your epithelial reticular cells also surround the capillaries, the only blood vessel that is present sa imuhang cortex. So, mo ni itsura on a closer look sa imuhang cortex. You have here the thymocytes or your T lymphocytes, and then you have the reticular cells. So, ang nakakos nga nung dark staining ng tao ng imong cortex is because of the presence of the abundance of T lymphocytes. So, inani siya, on closer look, you have your reticular cells or your epithelial reticular cells and then the lymphocytes. So, there are actually 3 types of epithelial reticular cell na naa sa imuhang cortex. You have the type 1, the type 2, and the type 3. So, si type 1, siya ang nag-separate sa cortex from the connective tissue capsule and the trabecula that surrounds the vascular elements of your cortex. So, siya ang naa sa periphery or siya ang nag-separate sa cortex and the capsule. Si type 2, naapod siya sa mid-cortex, which is a long, wide sheet-like process or naa siya long, wide sheet-like processes na nag-form sa desmosomal junctions sa each other. We also have the type 3 epithelial reticular cell, which is located sa deep sa cortex and at the corticomedullary junction. So next, we have the medulla of your thymus. So your medulla or the medulla of your thymus actually stays lighter than the cortex and mas continuous siya or is continuous from lobule to lobule. So this is your medulla and this is your cortex. So sa medulla, naadira ay mga plasma cells, your lymphocytes, macrophages, and some epithelial reticular cells. Aside from that, naapod tayo gitawag og thymic or Hassel's corpuscle, which is concentrically arranged sa imuhang concentrically arranged epithelial reticular cell, which is a characteristic feature of your thymic medulla, meaning the presence of this thymic corpuscle or your Hassel corpuscle is a distinguishing factor or characteristic sa imuhang thymic medulla. So para makaila ka og unsa na or para mahibaw-an nimo kung medulla ba na siya sa imong thymus, imong pangitaon kay ang Hassel's corpuscle. So the same with your cortex, naapod siya tulo ka type of epithelial reticular cell. You have the type 4, type 5, and your type 6. So si type 4 is closely associated with the type 3 sa imuhang cortex. Si type 5 forms the cytoreticulum of your medulla, and si type 6 is siya ang composed siya of the most characteristic feature of your thymic medulla, which is the Hassel's corpuscle. So di ba mo man ni imuhang medulla. So imuhang pangitaon kay ang imuhang Hassel's corpuscle. So these are your Hassel corpuscles. So in a closer look, no, mo ni imuhang cortex, the capsule, mo ni cortex, and then you have your Hassel's corpuscle within the medulla of your thymus. So again, your Hassel's corpuscle, mao na siya ang distinguishing factor or distinguishing characteristic of the medulla sa imong thymus. So mo ni siya ang imuhang Hassel's corpuscle. Next, we have your lymph nodes. So lymph nodes are a small encapsulated oval structures that are interposed in the path of your lymph vessels to serve as filters for the removal of the bacteria and other foreign substances. So around 99% of the impurities nga naa sa imuhang or 99% of the impurities found in the lymph are removed by the macrophages. Meaning, pag naakay ka ng mga foreign materials around your body, most of them are actually brought padulong sa imuhang lymph nodes by your macrophages. Muna kabantay mo if kana hilantan mo or kana bitaw na you're not feeling well. Muna yung ginatawag og kanang lusay, kanang murag burot bitaw somewhere. Let's say, for example, sa imong ilok tapit or diri sa imong liog, ana. Muna siya ang imuhang lymphs and moong gaburot na siya, it's because the impurities or katong mga foreign materials are actually brought by your macrophages padulong dito sa imuhang lymph nodes. So meaning nagtipok sila dito sa imuhang lymph nodes. So muna siya nga medyo ga-inflame siya. So prevalently, your lymph nodes are found in your neck, the axilla, your groin, and along the major vessels and in your body cavities. So same with your thymus, among lymph node napod na siya capsule. So the capsule is usually surrounded with adipose tissue. So kanimo ni siya ang inyong adipose tissue. I hope you recognize this as your adipose tissue. And then composed po siya of a dense, irregular collagenous connective tissue which contains some elastic fibers as well as some smooth muscles. So, muna siya ang imuhang capsule. So, afferent lymphatic vessels enter your convex aspect and then the efferent lymphatics and the blood vessel piece, the hilum. So, muna siya ang itsura sa imuhang lymph nodes. So, muna ni imong afferent lymphatic vessels. So, enter sila diri na asya valve or na asya kaning valve so that ma-ensure ni mo nga dili mo balik ang or dili mo atras ang flow sa imong lymph, walay mo balik. So muna siya imong afferent lymphatic vessels na asya sa capsule sa imong lymph nodes, naka-attach sa capsule sa imong lymph nodes. And then diri sa imong hilum or sa hilus nimo is na dira ang imong efferent lymphatic vessels. So muna siya ang imuhang, nadiri again your hilus, nadiri, and then you have your efferent lymphatic vessels. So histologically, ang imuhang lymph node, na-divide na siya into 3 regions. You have your cortex, your paracortex, and your medulla. So you have here, again, you have muna siya histologic picture sa imuhang lymph nodes. You have the capsule in which makita nimo ang afferent lymphatic. The cortex, you have the germinal center or the follicle, and then the inner cortex. So the cortex of the lymph node is subdivided into compartments that houses your B cell. You have your rich primary and your secondary lymphoid nodules. So the lymphatic nodules, na siya dark corona, which is mostly your B lymphocyte, and then a lighter staining germinal center, which houses the activated B lymphocytes, lymphoblasts, macrophages, as well as the dendritic reticular cells that are found in the cortex. So, the connective tissue po sa trabecula nimo subdivides the cortex into complete compartments, and the subcapsular and cortical sinuses display lymphocytes, reticular cells, and your macrophages. So, di ba mo, man ni siya ang imuhang cortex. So, your cortex na siya'y lymphatic nodules. So, sa imong lymphatic nodules, nadira ang imuhang naakay katong darker staining as well as the lighter staining. So the afferent lymph vessels pierce, again, di ba, imuhang afferent lymphatic vessel, naka-pierce siya sa imuhang capsule in which ang imuhang lymph or the lymph will enter the subcapsular sinuses. So, gikan sa imong afferent lymphatic vessels, ang lymph musulod siya pasulod sa imong subcapsular sinuses. And then, kani siya nga mga sinuses will continue hangtod sa ma-release siya or ma-secrete siya diri sa imuhang medullary sinuses. And eventually, mo enter na din siya sa imong efferent lymphatic vessel. So, gikan sa afferent, padulong sa imong subcapsular sinus, eventually, maato siya sa medullary sinus until such time ma-release siya sa efferent lymphatic vessels. So the incomplete compartments of your your cortex houses the primary lymphoid nodules, which are spherical aggregates of your B lymphocytes. So you have here, di ba naaman kay, so duha na siya, you have your lymphoid follicle and your germinal center. So sa germinal center, mo na siya gitawag na ito imuhang secondary nodule. Ang imuhang primary is the lymphoid follicle. So imuhang lymphoid follicle na adira ang imuhang B lymphocytes in which both the virgin B cells as well as the B memory cells. Sa imuhang germinal center or sa imuhang secondary nodules, naadira ang imuhang, muna siya ang site sa imuhang B memory cell as well as the plasma cell generation. So this is your, this is the connective capsule sa imuhang lymph node, and then you have the cortex, the medulla, in which sa cortex naadira imong germinal center, you have the follicle, and then kaning light staining is your germinal center or the secondary nodule. So you have here the darker staining is the site sa imuhang kani siya, mo ni siya imuhang germinal center kaning lingin. So in closer look kani, I hope you can see kani siya diri, this is considered to be darkly staining. Muna siya ang site sa imong proliferation sa imong packed B cells, whereas ang kani siya gitawag na siya og centroblast. Ang darker part sa imong germinal center is called as the centroblast, and then ang kaning lighter portion or kaning diri dapit sa ubos na lighter portion or kaning green na part diri no, naadira ang imuhang centrocyte. So again, kaning darker nga part sa imong germinal center, gitawag na siya centroblasts or naa siya mga centroblast in which kaning mga centroblast once they mature, mubalhin na dai ni sila dito sa imuhang light zone which gitawag na dai na siya og centrocytes. Next, we have the paracortex of your lymph nodes. So the paracortex of your lymph nodes, this is the region of your lymph node between the cortex and the medulla. So it houses most of your T cells. We also have the postcapillary venules and their characteristic cuboidal endothelium are also present dira sa imuhang paracortex. So you have here, so kung animated nga picture, you have here mo ni siya imuhang cortex. And then in between the cortex and your medulla is your paracortex. So next, we have your medulla of your lymph nodes. So sa medulla, nadira na display connective tissue trabecular medullary cords, which is composed of macrophages, plasma cells, and lymphocytes. And the medullary sinusoids line the discontinuous endothelial cells. So sa medulla po sa imuhang lymph nodes, naa siya mga sinusoids na nag-contain of lymphocytes, your plasma cells, as well as the macrophages. And the region of the hilum is also evident, which is a result of a thickened capsule and the lack of your lymphatic nodules. So mo ni siya imuhang, again, this is part of your lymph nodes, mo ni imuhang capsule. You have here the cortex, the darker staining, and then the medulla. So sa medulla, padulong na dahil na siya sa imuhang hilus or your cilium. So this is how your medulla would look like, or the medulla part of your lymph node would look like. You will see the medullary cords and the medullary sinuses. You have here the medullary cord and your medullary sinuses. So again, these are the medullary part of your lymph node. So same, again, the medullary part, gihapon ni siya sa imuhang lymph node. So next, we have here your tonsils. So si tonsils, these are incompletely encapsulated aggregates of your lymphoid nodules which guard the entrance sa imuhang oral pharynx. So again, your tonsils are lymphoid nodules that is located sa inner surface sa imong pharynx and are important in developing immunity to oral pathogens. So naay tulo ka tonsils We have your pharyngeal tonsil, the palatine tonsils, and your lingual tonsil. So si palatine tonsils, naana siya epithelium which is covered by a stratified squamous keratinized non-keratinized epithelium which extends into your tonsillular crypts. Or the bilateral palatine tonsils are located sa boundary sa imong oral cavity and the oral pharynx between your palatoglossal and the palatopharyngeal fold. So this is your palatine tonsil. So dira nimo makita imong palatine tonsils. So the superficial aspect sa imong palatine tonsils is covered by your stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium, whereas ang iyang inner portion is, or the deeper aspect sa imong palatine tonsil is surrounded by a connective tissue, which is what we call as a capsule. So covered siya with a dense irregular collagenous connective tissue capsule, which separates your tonsil from the underlying pharyngeal wall musculature. So muna siya, si capsule. So ang nag-separate sa imong tonsils sa imong pharyngeal wall is your capsule or a dense irregular collagenous connective tissue. So ang imuha pong or kaning superficial, di ba, we have mentioned na ang nag-cover or ang superficial lining sa imong palatine tonsil is a stratified squamous epithelium, non-keratinized squamous epithelium. So kani siya, mao po ni siya ang nagline sa crypts sa imuhang palatine tonsil. So mo ni siya gitawag nato og crypts kaning mga mura og sana kanang hiwa bitaw mer siya pasulod na crypts. Basta crypts ang tawag ana niya, invagination sa imuhang tonsils. Mo na siya gitawag og crypts. So kani sa crypts nimo frequently, or these crypts frequently contain some food debris, kanang mga discommitted epithelial cells, dead leukocytes, bacteria, and other antigenic substances. Whereas, diri sa parang kaiman nimo sa imong tonsils, makakita ka og daghang lymphoid nodules. So, muna siya mga lymphoid nodules in which prominent ang ilahang germinal centers, which is indicative nga na ay B-cell formation. So, the presence of these germinal centers again indicates that there is a B-cell proliferation or B-cell formation. So this is your palatine tonsils. You have here the stratified squamous epithelium, the germinal center, which is found sa imuhang mga lymphoid nodules, and the crypts. So sa imuhang palatine nodules, naa siya'y multiple nga mga crypts. You will find multiple crypts. So again, this is also a palatine tonsil. You have the lymphatic nodules, no, which in prominent kayo ang iyang germinal center. So this is a tonsillar crypt wherein makita nimo ang stratified squamous epithelium amo inagline sa imuhang tonsil crypt. So other form or other type of tonsil is your pharyngeal tonsil. Same with your palatine tonsil, naapod siya epithelium, wherein ang imuhang pharyngeal tonsil, makita nimo na siya diri sa roof sa imuhang nasal pharynx. So similar siya sa imong palatine tonsil, but incomplete capsule, or its incomplete capsule is thinner. Mas nipis ang iyahang capsule compared with your palatine tonsil. So, aside from that, instead po of crypts, ang imuhang pharyngeal tonsil kay naa siya gitawag nato og pleats. So, this is how your pharyngeal tonsil would look like. So, wala siya crypts, but naa siya mga folds or gitawag og pleats. So, your pharyngeal tonsil also has your secondary follicle or katoy imuhang germinal center. So, the same with your palatine tonsil. So, iyahang epithelium po, it is covered, or your pharyngeal tonsil is covered by a pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. And then, iyahang lymphatic nodules display, or most of the lymphatic nodules also display the germinal centers, and iyahang capsule is thinner, which is situated deeper sa imong tonsil, and naa siya'y ducts or ducts of the seromucous glands, which is beneath sa imong capsule and pierces the tonsil to open onto the epithelially covered surface. So this is the mucous gland of your pharyngeal, or the mucinous gland of your pharyngeal tonsils. So this is also the ciliated pseudostratified columnar mucosa, or again, your pharyngeal tonsil is lined by a ciliated pseudostratified columnar epithelium. So you have your lymphoid cells and then the epithelial cells. Next, we have the lingual tonsils. So si lingual tonsils nimo naa siya sa dorsal surface or sa posterior 1/3 of your tongue. So mo ni siya imuhang lingual tonsil. So there are several number and they are several in number, and they are also covered with superficial or stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium. So the same parehas sila og covering ni Palatine tonsil nga stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium. So napod siya capsule but also thin, and then napod siya mga lymphatic nodules, present po siya, napod siya mga germinal centers, ang iyang mga lymphatic nodules, and na siya seromucous glands which open into the base of the crypts. So mo ni siya ang imuhang lingual tonsil, napod siya crypt. So ang difference lang with your lingual and your palatine tonsil is that sa lingual, isa lang imuhang crypt. So, or each lobe or each tonsil will only have a single crypt, whereas si palatine tonsil is na siya multiple nga crypt. So manto isa lang ang crypt sa imuhang lingual tonsils. Then we have your spleen. So si spleen is considered as a major secondary lymphoid organ. It is around 12 centimeters or 5 inches long. It is attached to the lateral border of your stomach via the gastrosplenic ligament. So your spleen is also considered to be a fragile organ with a strong capsule na siya'y dark red because of the vascularization. And your spleen is also sometimes called as the filter of the blood because of its extensive vascularization and the presence of your macrophages and dendritic cells that remove the microbes and other materials from your blood, including katong mga dying na nga mga red blood cells. So aside from mga microbes and other materials na gina-remove this spleen, ihapon nang gina-remove apil ang katong mga old and dying na mga red blood cells. So, mo ni itsura sa imuhang spleen. So again, your spleen is the largest lymphoid organ in your body. Naa siya collagenous connective tissue nga capsule, and naa siya convex na portion and a concave aspect which contains or naa siya hilus or hilum katong iyahang concave na portion. So iyahang dense irregular fibroelastic connective tissue capsule occasionally also houses some smooth muscle cells and is surrounded by a visceral peritoneum. So naa siya visceral nga peritoneum. So your capsule, again, the capsule of your spleen is composed of a dense irregular collagenous connective tissue which is thickest sa hilum portion of your spleen and contains some elastic fibers as well as some smooth muscle cells. So it is covered by a mesothelium, but they are not surrounded with adipose tissue. So the trabecula of your spleen, the trabecula portion, bears blood vessels which extends from the capsule into the substance of your spleen. So ang imuhang spleen, kung imuha na siyang tungaon, or if you cut a fresh spleen, manana siya murag kanang gray areas which is surrounded by red areas. Mo nang gitawag siya og white pulp, katong gray area gitawag siya og white pulp kani, and then ang kani red area gitawag pud siya og red pulp. So unsa may naa sa white pulp o sa imuhang red pulp? So sa white pulp, naadira ang imuhang periarterial lymphatic sheath and the lymphatic nodules with the germinal centers. So both your periarterial and your lymphatic nodules surround the eccentrically located central artery, which is a distinguishing characteristic of your spleen. So si spleen lang ang naay central artery. So these are your central arteries located sa imuhang white pulp. So this is the white pulp and then the red pulp portion of your artery, spleen. So this is the central artery, again, the distinguishing characteristic of your spleen. We also have what we call as your marginal zone. So the marginal zone is actually a looser accumulation of your lymphocyte, macrophages, and plasma cells that is located between sa imuhang white and red pulp. So ang naa sa imuhang marginal zone is lymphocytes, your macrophages, and as well as some plasma cells. But dili siya mas dense or dili kay siya, wala kay siya nagtipok compared with your others. So supplied siya, or the marginal zone is supplied by a capillary loop which is derived from your central arteries. Then we have the red pulp, which is composed of pulp cords and sinusoids. So these pulp cords are composed of delicate reticular fibers, some stellate-shaped reticular cells, some plasma cells, macrophages, and cells of your circulating blood. Whereas kaning sinusoids pod na naa sa imong red pulp, it is lined by elongated discontinuous endothelial cells, which is surrounded by a thickened hoop-like basement membrane in association with your reticular fibers. So, in a closer look, in ano yung itsura sa imuhang blood vessel sa imong spleen or the blood vessel of your spleen. This is the white pulp. Kani siya diri na diri mo ni ang white pulp. So kaning primary follicle, the marginal zone, the pulse are all located sa imuhang white pulp. Sa red pulp na dira imuhang capsule, the trabecula, and your vascular sinusoids, or the vascular sinusoids lang ang nasa imong red pulp. Sa red pulp kay surrounded siya with your capsule. So ang imuhang blood, since nag-talk man ta with the blood vessel of your spleen, so we're going to discuss how is the blood, or how does your blood flow inside your spleen. So first, mo enter na siya sa imuhang artery. Once ma-enter na siya sa imuhang artery, or sa imuhang, it enters the trabecular artery man. So enter na siya sa imong trabecular artery. Gitawag na siya trabecular artery kay surrounded man siya with trabecula. So once ma-enter siya sa imong trabecular artery, mo-enter na siya into a smaller vessel which is surrounded by a what we call as your periarterial lymphatic sheath. So kani siya, this is a sheath of lymphocytes, meaning within your pulse, mostly T lymphocytes ang naa dinha. So ang kani siya nga cell or imong blood mo pass through your central arteriole, wherein the central arteriole is sheathed with or covered with what we call as your pulse, or they are mostly your T cells. So naka-engulf siya or covered siya, or imong central arteriole is enclosed with your pulse. And then once ma-reach na siya sa portion, or ma-reach niya ning portion na kanang wala na ang imuhang pulse, mo divide na pud imuhang central arteriole into smaller arterioles, which is what we call as your peninsular arterioles. Now, your peninsular arteries, na siya tulo ka region. You have the pulp arteriole, the sheath arteriole, and the terminal arterial capillaries. So, dira na dayon mo flow ang imuhang blood. So there are three kanang theories or three ways, or naitulo ka theory how your blood flows or how your blood enters the trabecular vein. So first, we have the closed circulation, meaning gikan sa kaning peninsular arteries nimo mo enter siya sa imuhang there will be an exchange through the closed circulation, padulong na dayon sa imuhang veins or your trabecular vein, and then exit na din ang imuhang blood. Next, we have the open circulation nga theory. So, gikan aning terminal end sa imuhang artery, so mugawas imuhang blood dira, and then there will be diffusion pasulod diri sa imuhang red pulp veins or pasulod sa imuhang veins. And then once masulod na ang blood, diffuse na imong blood pasulod diri sa imuhang veins, mo enter na din siya sa imong trabecular vein, and then release na din pa-exit sa imong spleen. We also have both the open and a closed system circulation. So all of those are just explanation or kanang theories how your blood flow pasulod or gikan sa sulod pasulod gikan sa artery padulong sa imong trabecular vein pagawas sa imong spleen. So those are just theories how your blood flow within your spleen. So those are your lymph nodes or your lymphoid system. So I hope you were able to learn about your lymphatic system or your immune system. Anyways, kani siya nga discussion is again introduction lang gini siya sa inyong immunology nga subject. Merely the kani siya nga subject is just introducing you to the parts or ang mga histologic pictures sa inyong body organs. So I think that's all for today, and I hope you read your books as well to know more and to learn more. Again, thank you for joining, and goodbye, everyone.